You are listening to the Story of Wine podcast. Join us as we discover the people shaping the world of wine. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we give you access to the voices defining today's wine culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Story of Wine podcast. I am your host, Billy Galanko, and I am so excited to have this first episode under the new podcast name. We couldn't start with a better guest. We have a paragon of the wine world and his daughter who is picking up right where he left off. But before we get to the interview, I wanted to note for all of our new listeners that yes, this did used to be called the Vint Wine Podcast. You are not confused, and if you hear that on past episodes, I will not be able to edit out the name Vint from a lot of the other episodes, but I am now the sole owner of the podcast. I have renamed it the Story of Wine Podcast in homage to one of my favorite books by Hugh Johnson, The Story of Wine. I highly recommend everybody check that out. And moving forward, we will be operating under a new kind of format. So in the past, it was 100% interviews. Moving forward, we are going to have different types of episodes, including interviews, of course, but then we'll also have episodes where it's just me either talking about history or wine trends in the industry. And I have a lot of different perspective and new insight to share based on my new role in the wine world. I am now the marketing director at wine.com, so it's a much different environment than I had at Vint. So I have a lot of new perspectives, and with that, I'll be able to have a lot of new interesting guests as well for the podcast. Alongside the new name and the new format, we are going to also launch a website here in the coming months, thestoryofwine.com. Really excited about that. And then we'll also be working on some other forms of content. In terms of cadence for the episodes, it won't be weekly anymore. I'm hoping to define that soon. But I'm really excited for everybody who has waited so long for this episode, and welcome to everyone who is new to the podcast. I've actually been sitting on this interview for a long time. I wanted this one to be the first episode when we get the new name, and it is with Nicolas Joly and his daughter, Virginie. I've always been a fan of Jolys wines. I've always loved Savennières in general. I've always been interested in biodynamic viticulture and winemaking. And this interview was really more of me just sitting and getting a personal lecture from Nicolas. It was so great. I hope everybody really can sit through and just appreciate all of the wisdom that he's sharing. It was more of a philosophy lesson as well as a practical, this is what biodynamics is. It's really a deep dive of the mechanics of biodynamics as well as the philosophy behind it. And I learned so much, and it was really great to have both of them there. So occasionally Nicolas would talk for an extended period, and I would just try to take in everything that he was saying. And then Virginie would also provide more color as to what he was referring to. And for those of you who are not familiar, the Joly family owns some of the most prime vineyard land in Savennières, which is itself one of the most unique wine growing regions in all of the Loire Valley. They focus on Chenin Blanc, as the region does, and they own vineyard land in some of the most prime areas of Savennières, including La Collée des Serrans, which is an appellation unto itself and a monopole of the Joly family. And the other wines that they make are Les Clos de Bergerie and Les Vieux Clos as well. And some of these are the most deep and complex and interesting wines that you've ever had. Very powerful. It is hard to describe and to put into words, but if you ever have the opportunity, go find some Joly wine, some Savennières, especially with a little bit of age on it, and you can get one of the most unique wine experiences that you've ever had, and you will not regret it. In this episode, we don't really talk as much about the wines themselves as much as the philosophy and the winemaking and viticulture behind them, and then really get into just different aspects of biodynamics and Nicolas' thoughts that he's carefully crafted and evolved over decades and decades and decades of winemaking. We talked for over an hour, so I will keep this intro very short, but I am excited to have everybody here. I am excited to kick off this new chapter for the Story of Wine podcast, and I am excited for this interview. So without further ado, here is Virginie and Nicolas Joly. All right, we are here with two very special guests, Nicolas Joly and Virginia. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for calling us.
Thank you.
I've been big fans for many years. I've gone through many of your writings and tasted many of your wines. So I'm very excited to have you here. Can you share a little bit about who you both are and where you guys make your wines?
C'est le curriculum, non?
Oui.
Ouais. Basically, I'm born in a family where nature was very important. Through learning how to fish, how to shoot, how to hunt. This is not well seen today. I stopped this a long time ago, but it was a huge help to understand some subtleties behind nature, knowing what wind and what temperature would bring what bird or what duck on a specific spot, knowing when you could catch eel according to the level of water. All this finally permits to be linked in a deeper way to what is called nature, which too often is understood too superficially. Basically, after that, I did business school in France. Why, I don't know, because there was something to be done. Then I joined Columbia University for an MBA in 1970. I graduated in 1970, did my military service in the Ministry of Finance of Quebec because I could, through some agreement, escape that military service, which for me was a good thing, and worked for Morgan Guarantee in investment research, advising investment in the chemical industry mainly and in the drug industry. At that time, for 4 years I did that. At that time I was very much recommended the Roundup, that table weed killer, which was very profitable. And then I stopped it all, not really knowing why, returning on a vineyard which was run at a loss, and I didn't care. I was 32, 33. I'm born in 45, and that was in end of 1978, beginning of 79. After a year, I started Biodynamic, not knowing why. I'm a great believer in fate when I look backward, because you think you take decisions, and finally, who is taking the decision for you is important too. It's important to open your mind to that possibility. And the first 7-8 years of Biodynamic were very tough, because on one side, I didn't realize that immediately, but we were really moving in a direction which was opposite to the financial interest behind farming. And that was tough. We were considered as a sect for 8 years, at least. And then this well-known woman, Lalubise Leroy, who was running Romanée Conti at that time, came. She caught it immediately. So she moved Romanée Conti in Biodynamic. So very quickly after that, we were not anymore a sect. And then you had Anne-Claude Leflèvre, who came, and later other well-known names. But the beginning is tough because you can't use... You have disease. You start from the situation. Everybody in 78 were more or less organic. Weed killers came at the end of the 70s in France. We were really wondering what it was. It was presented as a huge saving of money, presented as being more social, because it was less work for your people. It is true. It is true. And I could go on with this because it's important to move in that understanding. You had 4 main steps toward a total disorder regarding nature. First step was there's weed killers. I tried weed killers for a year. I saw immediately that it was destructive. Many people didn't realize that. When you have a weed killer, it destroys the microorganism of the soil. And without microorganism in the soil, you have much less growth process. Then in the third step, the same guy who were advising the weed killers came to you and said, growing is not a problem, use chemical fertilizers, which were not much used in the past. And this is a growth that you obtain through water, because these chemical fertilizers are salt. And if you take a teaspoon of salt, you will see that you are thirsty. It's a bit the same phenomena for a plant. So you obtain growth through too much water, through an excess of water. And therefore, copper and sulfur, we Bordelais, if you prefer, and sulfur, which were very efficient, were not efficient enough. And then the third drama is terrible, because that really the main step for destroying what is an appellation contrôlée. So it has to be taken very seriously. It goes systemics. So these molecules of synthesis were taken in the sap. This is the murder. And I will explain why afterwards. And poisoning the sap. The good thing is that you had no more disease, whether it rained or not. But you have been poisoning the sap. And I will return on this. What is the result? The result that you have a crop which is not at all marked by the originality of your place, and this was opening a huge space for technology which most wine drinkers totally ignore even today, because the press is immensely silent about this. If I move again backward, one has to realize when you are on a vineyard, then from a bud, early in spring, tiny bud, 2 millimeter, to a crop. You have branches, you have leaves, you have a flower at the beginning, which becomes a grape. So you have few tons of matter, according to the pruning of your vine, which comes every year on 1 hectare. It's essential to always keep in mind that if you take the water away, it's called dry matter, 92% of that stuff is linked to photosynthesis. So when you poison the sap, you poison that fabulous system which can catch all the originality of your climate, made of when comes the rain, how cold it is, where are the wind, do you have mist or fog at one time, not at another. All this finally is 92%, is a big 92% of the taste of your wine come from photosynthesis. The soil is only 8. So of course the soil has to be alive, but today you have too many people according, in my mind, a too large importance to what is the soil. The soil should be alive, but understand that the soil is just a sponge, receptive to a climate, and that most of the wine is the climate. Now, have you been planting your vine in the right spot? Have you been able to avoid that stupid clone, which is more than 90% of demand for vines? The clone is an idiot, because within each kind of vine, you have maybe 200-300 different subtleties. When you take the same, these subtleties doesn't exist anymore. So all the teaching of universities, etc., are pushing young people toward a dead end. And what is the exit of that dead end? It's called technology. And we can return more in depth on what is a farming. But technology, it's what you could say today, that 85% of the taste of your wine is legally, because it's totally legal, is legally manufactured in the cellar. And when you have a deep biodynamic and a good place for vines, we can return on this later. The essential achievement is that you have almost nothing to do in your cellar. You check what is happening, but you never control the fermentation. You never do osmosis. You never bring this terrible aromatic yeast. Ask the people who want to learn about this to type on internet aromatic yeast. They will realize that we have legally the right, us wine growers, to put more than 320 tastes in a wine legally without mentioning anything to the consumer, which is a murder of an appellation contrôlée, which was created by wise people realizing that a specific spot, a specific soil and a specific climate and a specific plant, it could be olive tree, it could be a vine, etc., would bring a specific taste. This is the greatness of nature. And same for oysters, same for cheese. Now you see that people have the right to change a specific cow which was behind a specific taste of a specific cheese there in France. All this has been destroyed, and you can bring a cow which has a yield multiplied by 2 of milk, and then you have been legally destroying the concept of an appellation contrôlée. And by the way, I want to mention that a significant part of the huge crisis which concerns the wine today is linked to this technology. Because this technology, these guys are honest. I know many people in Bordeaux, etc. They really feel that they are doing the best of the best, and they think that they are doing the best of the best. They are people of good faith, but the cellar has become a factory, and the place where the vine is growing is just a dead thing. It improves a little bit, but even if you make a good farming, when you have been pressing the grape, and this enters the cellar, the rules which are applied to the cellar are totally destroying the originality which was achieved by the vine. And this is not explained. And most of the wine growers now who are moving in the very expensive creation of a cellar with many machines, with all sorts of control, they are not anymore cellars, they are hospital. The cellar is just a maternity, a place where you check that everything is going on right. Who is the winner of that dead end? The winner of that dead end is a cheap land and a cheap labor. And now you can find in France, I don't know what is the situation in the States, but some bottles in chain stores at less than 10 euro, 8 euro, which can sometimes, on a blind taste, be very close, if not better, of a wine that you can buy 200 or 300 euro, because the wood taste is added. In other words, if you move to the understanding of that phenomena which lasted 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, with Robert Parker, who was a very honest guy, I had a private lunch with him, that guy was great. His taste was copied. I had a guy coming here 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Monsieur Joly, let me do your wine, and I will get you a 95 out of Parker, and you will increase your price by 50%, and you are going to return to me part of this excess profit. Huge dead end, with a total misunderstanding of what is a soil, what is a vine, what is a climate, and how you could help for the vine this fabulous secret process through photosynthesis where all sorts of subtleties are caught. So if I return now to what are these steps as a farmer to reach the goal of not acting in the cellar, because this is the real goal. What should I do outside so that my crop has enough, so that in the cellar things will go on right? We could move in that understanding a bit deeper. I would say 95%, 98% right. First step, what is a vine? A vine is a very, very strong plant. In religion, you have the wheat, which is linked to the sun, just an upward process. And we could talk about a wheat which has been murdered too, as a vine has been murdered. But the wheat is just an upward process, fabulous process. A wheat should go more than 1.50 meters high, not 70 centimeters for the sake of resisting to strong winds. This is absurd, but it's not the topic of the day. And the vine is just a downward process. It is Dionysos. If you want a vine to express itself, it has to fight. You need to give situations which are quite tough. When I see engineers bringing all what the vine should have, so the growth, this is stupid. This is stupid, because if you give too much toy to a child, he will be spoiled. It's exactly the same for a vine. a vine needs to show its Dionysos process, this link to these underground forces. So what root are you going to plant? You need a root which goes downward, not a root which goes horizontal. And then you need, it shouldn't be too harsh, but you need some conditions where the vine has to fight a little bit. This is where you will have a special structure in your wine. And then another thing that you have to notice, monoculture is a drama. Monoculture is a drama because nature hates monoculture. So what do you do as a wine grower when you have monoculture? Try to restore a landscape. Number one, somehow, if the ground is not too expansive, plant few trees. Try to have a field which is not planted. Second step, extremely important, bring animals. Bring animals. Because you have 4 kinds of animals. You have 4 steps of matter. You have these animals deeply linked to the soil. This is called a pig or wild boar. You have these animals deeply linked to water. This is a cow with this huge capacity of bringing milk. You have these animals linked to light forces, mainly. This is a goat, this is a sheep. And you have these animals linked to heat, horses. When you go against the will of a horse, he will stand up. When you go against the will of a cow, it will go downward. And if this is a very interesting experiment to do, if you divide, for example, 1 hectare in 4 parts, in biodynamic, we'll return to biodynamic. In biodynamic, if you put manure from a cow, manure from a pig, manure from a sheep or for a goat, manure from a horse, all the rest is the same. If you don't do all these stupidities in your cellar, which in addition cost a fortune, then you will have 4 different tastes. With a pig, it's not very noble. With a horse, it is the best. But this leads people to understand that in the 4th state of matter, you can find them also among animals. And this is where I always defend. I could ask Virginie to send you this by email. Biodynamic, Recovering the Lost Art of Agriculture. That was the title in English. Because it's an art. The art of understanding what happens on your place and the art of catching or increasing the acoustic for these originalities. So we could move much more into detail. Now, what is the difference? Okay, we have seen that conventional farming is just a process of destruction where you have a deep need of technology to achieve a good wine. Yes, it is a good wine. And I have nothing against that in the sense that I take always the example of car. I have no passion for car. I ask my car to go on normally and to go for a certain number of miles, so it's fine. But some people who have a passion for cars, they want to know all the details. If you have a passion for wine, the first thing that you have to be aware of is that most of the wines that you taste are done legally through what I call aesthetical surgery. Because when you distort the taste, when you improve the taste, when you improve the concentration, when you bring fat in the wine so that it looks with a lot of fine in your glass, etc., 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 it's a perfect wine, which in my mind is absolutely charmless. Like beauty achieved from aesthetical surgery is impeccable, but it has no charm. It's exactly the same. And people don't care. Some people don't care, and I do respect that. Now, if you want to have the full expression of a very specific spot where you are, it's an intense research where you can start only by yourself. Okay, you may take an advisor for 1 or 2 years, but not more. Only you living on the spot will catch the language of the spot. And it's a long process. You can't press a button and have a result immediately. It takes a few years and sometimes more. How should I put my life, my soul in life? How much? When should I do it? how could I increase photosynthesis? This is something absolutely fabulous. But be careful if it's too hot, if it's too dry. Don't destroy your vines, because you can come up to a situation where you will destroy your vines. So it's learning music. When you have a neighbor who is a musician, he's starting music, for the first years it's very painful. And after it may become a pleasure. So when you are organic, it's the first good step, because you respect nature. You don't disturb nature. But you can't play as much with the distortion of the climate. You can't act as much on the distortion of the climate. When you are in biodynamic, which needs a definition, because biodynamic too often has become a flag for selling the wine, and I want to underline here that Demeter in United States is a much higher level than Demeter in Europe and Demeter in France and Demeter in Germany, mainly Germany. You have many rules. First rule, create your preparation on your spot. You have legally the right to buy it, yes. But when they are done on your spot, you could say they are informed by the originality of your spot, which is very important. When will you use them? There is no rules. You may 1 year use 3 times of one and 1 time of another, or 3 of each. You just have to understand them more in depth and move on according to the age of your wine, according to the deepness of the soil, according to the humidity or the rain which comes, etc., etc. But I always take the example that this is like tuning a musical instrument. And when you see musicians permanently tuning their musical instrument, one guy may say, stop it, you did it 10 times, why do you redo it? But it's exactly the same with the vineyard. When should I do it? How much? Should I have a little more of it, a little less of this? Next year, what should I do? It's a slow process where an advice in my mind is not a necessity after 2 years, because you can learn to walk when you are young with the help of someone, but at a point of time you should walk by yourself. And yourself, living on the spot, should have the understanding of what should be done. And you are not always right. But the fact that you are not always right is a learning process. One key factor is, we can return to avoid that stupid clones, to have a real massal selection, to have a root part which goes in depth in the soil, to have a short pruning. The more you prune your vine long, the more you are depending for your maturity to the climate. And you have some spots where the climate is not always good. And then some people say, it's the year of the century. For me, this is absurd. I was listening on the radio a year ago, a guy saying, no, it's not the year of the century, it is the year of the millenarium. This is grotesque. Every year is an interesting year. If you are a good musician, you are the musician by taking your decisions. You have the quality of your musical instrument is the place where you have your vine. Some people have a Stradivarius, some people have a violin, maybe not of high quality, and some people, and the acoustic is what you obtain mainly through biodynamic. Biodynamic is a fabulous potential for connecting your vine to a higher reality. Linked to the planets, yes, because each biodynamic preparation is linked to a specific planet, and linked to the star system. And when we touch that topic, one should always remember it's essential, more and more essential each year. Life, what we call life, does not belong to the planet Earth. Life is received by the planet Earth by its connection to the sun system. This is a key. And it's not the CO2 which is changing the climate. This is grotesque. It's not it's so small, and many scientists don't want it, but the system doesn't listen to them. The climatic change is linked to a huge number of satellites which turn around the Earth and are weakening the connection of the planet Earth to the solar system. This is where is coming the change of the climate. And when the Earth doesn't receive enough life forces, it is changing its magnetic polarity, trying to find a new direction where more life forces could be available. And what is known on a scientific level is that in a far past, we had more than 200 change of magnetic polarities, total. And I've seen with pleasure recently, not in depth, that some scientists now are trying to understand what is happening with the magnetic polarity of the Earth. The more we will have satellites, the more we disrupt that connection. For the time being, biodynamic, which is linked to the planet and to the solar system, which improves the acoustic of the planet, of the Earth to the planet and the solar system, this great acoustic, for the time being, through biodynamic preparation, is working. For how long, I don't know. If we continue an intensification of these satellites, it's really a distortion and a weakness of this connection which provide life on Earth. It's huge. And to these satellites, you could add billions and billions of antennas which receive these satellites. Very convenient for our comfort, very convenient for communicating to each other, certainly. But we have to remember each time that the side effect is a weakening of the life process, which is a gift to the Earth from the solar system. This is very important. So, what else? Now, I've been covering this fast, and then you could come with your question on what is not clear. But what else? When you taste a wine, just forget all what you have learned. When you taste a wine, you should see if suddenly you are touched here. We had 6 months ago a tasting with one guy from South Africa called Angus McIntosh, who has been doing a fabulous job on his small estate. And I wanted him to join a group that we did. And he came 92. I mean, we had some good wine, some less good wine. Many people are applying because this has a commercial success. It's not done for profit. But when I had that wine in my mouth, suddenly, yes, the wine is there, full stop. When the wine is there, it should go there. It is there. So it's very important to stop that process of analysis. I'm always saying as an example, if you choose your wife, don't choose it with a blood test. Choose it because suddenly you feel that there is something. And I think it's overdone, this idea of understanding a hint of this and of that. Sommeliers have been fooled because, yes, they have a great capacity for tasting wine, yes, but they don't realize that they taste a pure, smart technology used by an enologue. And why not? But let's drop the appellation contrôlée then. What else should I mention before you can come back with your questions? The result is not the same each year. As I said, it is music. And my deep belief is that, and shared by Virginie and my son, the key is harvesting. When you have a real massal selection, be careful, because today a massal selection is done of 3 clones, one more lie. But when you have a real massal selection, you have almost, as it is within each kind of vine, 200 to 300 sub-qualities. And the key is that a certain level of maturity is reached. Now, I know that the consumer doesn't want more than 11.5 of 12% of alcohol. I do respect this, but then they are not my customer. And I do respect the fact that they don't want it to go above a certain level of alcohol. I don't care. We want to harvest when the maturity is properly reached. And I always say, you don't cut a flower before it is opening. If it is opening, you see the flower. If you cut it before, you miss it. It doesn't matter with analog, because through technology I will bring the taste that, no, it's not the same. It's not the same. Let nature achieve its job. So you may come up with a wine which is 14% of alcohol and not 12 or 11.5. I don't care. I want the maturity to be rich. I want the song of the place to be achieved. I don't want to interfere with that song. I just want to improve the acoustic of that song. And then people have the right to accept it or not. I do respect this. So the answer is that you have to be small. Don't be a large producer, because the market is not ready for that type of speech. But if you are small, you can certainly keep on with your own philosophy and find enough people to share your philosophy. This is important. Then in the cellar, yes, we have some barrels, yes. No, they are not new, and we don't want them to be new. We can ferment either in a barrel or in a stainless container. I have nothing against these amphoras. I think it shapes in itself. A shape is a very deep. People have lost the understanding of shapes, but if you go in this old church of the 13th, 12th century, you will understand, or in the Cathedral of Chartres, you will understand all the knowledge that existed on shapes. I always tell young people, try, if you want to move into a vineyard and make your life out of it, sleep for 2 hours in a big barrel. You will see that you have a quality of sleep which is totally different than that in a cube or in a square room. So all this is a slow understanding which doesn't go with the marketing pressure of today, which doesn't go with the teaching which is done today. There was a guy, there is a farming school which is not bad, close from here, and some students come each year. And the first speech of the guy in charge of vines, I will not talk about biodynamic because it is too esoteric. But life, we are in life. Life is esoteric. The source of life is purely esoteric. Today, the teaching, at least what we have in France, is very rarely right if you want people to move in the direction which I'm defending. I don't know the situation in the States. But this is the market of tomorrow. Because a true wine has medicinal property. A true wine, if you don't overdo it, what was called the French paradox, it is true. It is true. You can take I don't take 2 glasses of wine a day, but you can cure several things through a true wine. That is true. And this could be understood too. So that's a long introduction. Now, with that landscape, come with a question which you find appropriate.
Well, you've covered almost everything, but I think even just touching on your last point, there was a reason wine was used as medicine for thousands of years before recently. So I think there's something to that. People wouldn't have kept doing it if it didn't help something. So I think that's spot on. I wanted to bring it back a little bit. You've covered so many of my questions already.
It's better to give a totally made.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. I loved every minute of it. Could you maybe talk a little bit about your vineyards now and the wines that you guys make and how maybe your efforts come through or how each expresses itself? Yeah.
Well, one point which I didn't cover, which is part of what you mentioned, where are you going to put your cellar? Here we have a place, because the place is very old. The vines were planted in the 12th century through monks. Monks at that time had a sort of deep understanding of the forces which are behind nature. And Cistercians always knew where to build a church, where to build a house, where to build a cellar, where to plant vines. They had that knowledge. So we have, from the place where we talk now, and this house was built at the very end of the 18th century, very beginning of the 19th century, we have a cellar, which is fine. But in the place where the monks were living, where I was living up to 6-7 years ago, now my son is living there is an old cellar, which, with no proof, I would say, is inhabited by fabulous forces. You can't prove it. It's just a fact. So it's interesting to see that the fermentation in these two spots are a bit different. So I want to draw the attention of people on the fact that you just don't dig a place to build a cellar. Find a place where your estate find appropriate to build a cellar. Number 2, don't make it too sophisticated and which cost a fortune. Just try to have most of the wine done underneath the level of the soil. Again, because of Dionysos. When it's underneath the level of the soil, there's an extra force which is active. But don't do a huge investment. There is no point. When I see in Bordeaux these cellars which cost millions, it's ridiculous. Everybody will laugh about that in the future. They are dead. It's a symmetry. There is no life forces coming in. Yes, the architect was doing something interesting in his mind, but in terms of forces, it's dead. And life forces have great difficulty to be there. And therefore, you need the assistant of technology. This is a dead end which should be avoided. Just makes and I can support this with the tasting we had in Sweden. And one guy with 3-4 hectares, I think he was building his cellar himself, partly underneath the level of the soil. The wine was tremendous, really tremendous. He was selling that wine at a very high price. But why not? This is demand and supply. I don't interfere in this. But the wine was really a great wine. Producing a great wine doesn't mean a great investment. And you have some spots sometime where people have not been planting vines, which could be excellent for vines. So I would advise people to move away from this normal song and to be themselves, creative with themselves. Go in Georgia. You have some fabulous space in Georgia. But it's not a reason why everybody should have this amphora. If you want to have an amphora, it's done for being underneath the soil. An amphora is just the roof of a church. The roof of a church is catching upper forces and bringing these forces downward. The amphora is catching earth forces and bringing it to the vine. But it shouldn't be a fashion, and when you land in the airport, you have amphoras everywhere. This is too much. So it's just a matter of investigation, of finding a link between your heart and a place. And we find this here. You have a long alley which has a very interesting energetical process. A coulée is a valley, a small valley. And then we plant, of course, when we buy vines, we provide our wood so that the originality of your place, these wood are fixed, fixed on the root part. But it's always your wood. You should keep always the originality of your wood when you replant vines. Also, the older is a vine, the better it is. Here we have no soil. It's rotten slate. And it takes a long time for the roots of the vine to go through. 15 years maybe. But once they are there, whether it is too dry or too hot, it doesn't really matter. So the older is your vine, the more in depth you are catching the place. And when you replant vines, the advice today is dramatic. Take it off in November, replant it in March, plant clones. You will have a crop in 3 years. This is purely grotesque if you want to avoid all this technology. Leave the place quiet 3 to 7 years. Plant a real massal selection, you won't have a crop for 5 years. We talk of 12 years at most, perhaps 9, perhaps 8. But then you have a vine which has a capacity to last long. So when you plant a vine, always ask yourself, what should I do so that that vine will have a long life? This is very important. All what I mentioned now was in the mind of people linked to the earth up to 50 years ago. But that generation passed away, and this terrible cleverness of neurons came in and finally was leading people in a direction which at the beginning was immensely profitable. Look at the evolution of the yield in the 80s, 90s, 2010. When you create the taste in the cellar, you can double your yield, triple your yield. The taste doesn't come from the place, but come from a smart enologue. But now it is the other side. And now this perfect wine, which are all the same, are boring. And now people drink less wine. Part of the reason why people drink less wine, because they find it boring. They are not touched by something alive. You are touched by a beautiful painting or by a beautiful landscape. If you return to life, you will see the market for wine returning and increasing again for true wines. And last, magazines can't play that game. Magazines can't give that information because they are depending on advertising budget. And to afford an advertising budget, you need to have high yields, you need to have technology, and you need to fool good people who do not know that the appellation contrôlée is much less present in the wine that they drink. So that's it.
That's all there is to it. No, well, that makes so much sense. I did want to, well, before we even talk about your wines, I wanted to ask, you had mentioned before that when you a living wine, you can open it and come back to it day after day, and it still shows its life force.
That's a very important point, because how could a consumer find out? Because you have many people, and I do respect this. For example, the owner of a vine would die. You have 3 children or 4 children. The value is very high. The tax, at least in France, are very high. How can you keep the place? If in addition you have to decrease the yield by 30-40%, you have to replant and to replace these stupid clones. They are stupid, these clones. They are planting because it's one harvest. One harvest means nothing. When you are a wine grower, you don't want to save time. You want to give your time for the full expression of a place. So all this is in opposition. And therefore, what do? Some people wish to return to something, and it's difficult. So I respect these situations. I underline the fact, don't overpay an advisor. I respect advisor. But you living on your spot, you are your own advisor. No one should decide instead of you. When you start maybe 1 year, 2 years, you had in the States some good guy. I remember a guy called Iron York. He had biodynamic in depth. But biodynamic in depth is a life. Huh? So finding if a place is proper for a vine or not, it's a key.
That doesn't explain why you should open the bottle before.
Yeah, sorry, I return to the bottle. So no, but all this explain how you could catch life forces. When you have the life forces, you open a bottle, you take half a glass and you recork it. You don't put it in the fridge. And you do that every day. What happens? You have the air coming in. You have oxidation coming in. Oxidation is a death force. If you have been putting enough life forces, Your vine doesn't mind about this death force. They are created as an incentive to show what they are. So the more you open the wine, the more you will see, perhaps, I would say, the aging potential of the wine, but also what is the strength which was caught by your vines and which express themselves in your glass. This is a very important factor. And I had the visit of a very well-known vineyard. The bottle was 500 euro a bottle, primeur. It came for technical exchange, but we were too far one from another to understand each other, but we were, the two of us, extremely polite. But he left his bottle and said, make sure when you open it that you drink it the same day. This is catastrophic. You can't make it worse. And this guy was sincere. So you see how the teaching has been creating two polarities which have nothing in common. And you see how this teaching, number one, is driving people toward a dead end. And number two, is decreasing the passion for wine, because your passion can come only from a real feeling, a deep feeling. And if the feeling has been legally faked, the passion is moving away. The only question that I have now, because many people can't go backward, already the value of vineyards have been decreasing a lot, and it will continue, because this very high price were linked to the fact that the yield had enormously increased, and that the taste was not affected because of technology, which was legal but unknown from the consumer. I think all this will decrease. And what else can you do? Can you ask yourself, will technology be smart enough to create an artificial originality? I can raise this question. Will technology be smart enough to resist oxidation once a bottle is open? But you can't fake nature for a too long time. And you see now, and in some groups that we are dealing with, you see now small wine growers having, if you go, for example, return to appellation, Renaissance des appellations in French, we have 230 guys. Some of them are very interesting people. I want also to mention Werner Michelon, Mein Klang. This guy is probably one, with Angus McIntosh, probably one of the two which are the more in depth with the understanding and practicing biodynamic. He did an experiment, extremely interesting. He took a lot of vine, divided in two parts, equal. Everything is the same. Same roots, same vines, same treatments in biodynamic. One is not pruned. So after 2 years, it's a huge mess. The other one is normally done. Now, you taste blind, lot 1 and lot 2. Lot 1 is done normally, lot 2 is unpruned and wild. Which one is the best? Lot 2. You understand that you are permanently, through your mind, through your heart. The heart is as important as the mind, and through your will. When you're a wine grower, you need a strong will. We are trying to investigate things, but sometimes the answer is different. This brings some humility, but it's very interesting to do. And as I said, the other one is used for the manure from 4 different animals, and see all the rest being the same, and see the taste. This is an opening on the deepness of nature, and it's only through that understanding of the deepness in nature, and therefore the deepness of the hidden forces, huge, which are behind biodynamic, done on the spot, that we could recreate a passion for real wine. And I do believe that it is possible.
I agree. I think that completely makes sense. And I see that with people who drink those types of wines. And then when I share your style of wines or a biodynamic wine with them, they have a completely different response than to most wines. Yeah. So I agree. I just wanted to touch on your wines a little bit more now, the ones that you and Virginie make, and maybe the differences, how each expresses themselves maybe differently, and why Chenin. Why Chenin is a good
Chenin, it's just the obligatory grape in the region here for white wines. As such, we have no choice, but it's also Chenin for a very good reason. It's definitely the best grape adapted to the soil we have here in the Loire Valley.
Yeah, but you have to understand that we are in France with all the craziness of France. Believe it or not, we had a control during our last crop. It was a month ago. On what was the control? Can you believe it? Very kind woman. She was controlling since 20 years, so you respect her. It's her job. What was she controlling? She wanted to make sure that the grape that we are harvesting was going in the press. I couldn't believe it. So we started with the tractor, with the grape. We are putting the grape in the press, and she said, yes, the control is good. This is France. You have to understand what happens in France. France is great for being a tourist. When you are a citizen, it's another story. Huh?
Then we have on the estate, to return to your very beginning question, the estate is in the Loire Valley. It's about 1 hour and a half drive from the Atlantic coast. Southwest from Paris, just to situate for the people who listen. And on the estate, which is 15 hectares of vine, we have the 3 appellations that exist around the village of Savennières. So we have the appellation Savennières, appellation Savennières Roche-aux-Moines, which is a small one inside the appellation of Savennières, and the appellation Coulée de Sérent, where we have the monopole. All 3 of them Chenin Blanc. 3 of them, Chenin Blanc in Massal selection, obviously. All 3 of them done exactly the same way in terms of biodynamic practice, in terms of harvest, of type of harvest, of maturity, of cellar. But then 3 different expression, of course, because the soil is not completely the same. The orientation to the Loire is not exactly the same. So it's 3 expressions, 3 brothers and sisters of wine, but 3 different wines.
Perfect. That makes sense. I just wanted to clarify for our listeners here. That's really helpful. But going back a little bit more to the macro question, I did have another question. That's something that I had read that I thought of now too. You had mentioned that some people are practicing biodynamics in name only. Maybe 1 in 10 are actually doing it right. Do you think people are trying to implement biodynamic practices just because they have to now because of climate change and other things? Or do you think they're doing it just to sell wines? Or do you think some people actually are doing it for the right reasons?
There is a bit of everything. Sure, you have part of them who do it for communication reasons, marketing reasons, because there is a part of the market they can take if they claim being biodynamic, because obtaining a biodynamic certification is not very difficult.
In France.
In France, at least, it's not very difficult. So, part of some vineyards are probably going in that direction, and when the trend is going to something else, they will maybe change. What I think in that situation, it's at least that part of land for some times has not been too much polluted, too much impacted. And I also do believe that if you do it for those reasons, the impact as such of the practice on your estate is not as deep as it could be. And then you have those who say, why not? There is something to search. And when you go step by step with the learning of the practice, It's when you study philosophy, you go slowly and slowly, and then you understand more and more, and then you are already in the right direction. And then you have those who try and who don't get the thing of it, and then they stop, and that's okay. Again, everybody of us is free as such to take the decisions. So
there is a paradox, because there is a necessity to have a control. I do respect this. On the other side, when you reach a certain level of quality, can you really control? The person who control would come in November. What have you done? You check that you didn't buy anything which is forbidden. Can you control that the biodynamic preparation were adapted to the real climatic condition? Difficult to tell. There is a point where you move from a practice to an art, and where control is, again, you need a control, but the control has a limit. It has a limit. Then it's beyond the control. And you find some people who are in depth in their vines. This is a big plus. You have some people who have a knowledge, but may not live on the place, and applies the knowledge in a very technical way. As Virginie said, something is lacking. And when you do a dynamization, what is a dynamization? It's a periphery which goes faster and faster and faster and faster, and which becomes a point. So you could say it's a world of non-matter which is densified towards the level of matter. During that process, you can yourself, with your level of understanding, link yourself in depth to what is called the elementary beings, which are most of the people in our time consider as ridiculous, but very well explained by Steiner. He had a book called The Elementary Beings, where you have those gnomes in charge of the root, those linked to water in charge of the sap, those linked to light instead of the bringing the forces for a flower, and those in charge of heat, of maturity. And when you move in the understanding of these forces, number one, it's a plus for those who are secretly doing the job, and number two, it's improve your acoustic. It improve your resistance to disease. It improve your capacity to deal at least partly to an irregular weather. I was terribly shocked 3 weeks ago to see my pear tree flowering like in spring. It is grotesque. There is a prophecy saying the year of the two spring. What happened if you have really a change in the magnetic polarity of the Earth? There was a book written in English by an American 20 years ago called The 0 Point. This book is very true. But if you move from one polarity to another, on one side of the hemisphere you have two winter, on the other side of the hemisphere you have two spring. And I see this process more and more. People don't care. But for me it's a deep shock. And this, again, is just the result of a lack of connection between the planet Earth and the solar system. This is a huge risk, which is not at all discussed because it's our comfort. It should be taken very seriously. I don't know if we can change it. And as I said, for the time being, biodynamic is enough. For how long? Also, another point, the more people on a specific spot practice more different estate, practice biodynamic in depth, the more you create a sort of atmosphere where you could say climate disease or strong storm and all these will avoid your place. Steiner explains that these strong storms and violent storms are due to the revolt of elementary beings which are treated like shit or not understood. But I could say maybe not more than maybe that we have not many people practicing biodynamic, but we have people practicing organic, and we give some biodynamic preparation when after the dynamization to few people around. I think it can create an atmosphere where the satisfaction of human being can limit the negative effect of the wrong side of climatic change. I think this could be studied. So if you are alone to do it, if you are 10 or 15 estate, I'm almost sure that some result could be proved in terms of resistance to the climatic change.
Nice. That would be interesting to continue to study. And on that note, I know we were a little over time. Thank you so much for all the extra time. Can you guys talk a little bit about maybe how some of the recent vintages with your wines have expressed themselves, or what they've been like?
Well, it's every vintage being different. The expression of the wines are every year different. Still, it remains the same family. We have it's the situation at the harvest time that may give a main difference. Here on the estate, we have, if I do it, basically two profiles of wines, vintages that are more late, start of harvest, end of September, and therefore we have the morning fog of the Loire coming. This develops naturally the botrytis, which is something we like to have in the wines, and because the combination of botrytis on Chenin Blanc with the slate soil we have give, with the aging, a very nice expression of the minerality. So it's very interesting to have that in our. Most of the colleagues don't like it because when the wines are young, the first 5-6 years maybe, you have sorts of oxidative notes, which is not oxidation, but those notes are of over maturity, yes, and not everybody likes it. So it makes wines a bit more difficult on the market because they need to be explained a bit more. But it's very representative of the estate, and this happens only when the vintage is late. And then we have the profile of early vintages, like we have, for example, in now 25, we started harvest 6th of September or 5th of September, and so almost no botrytis. Very nice golden grapes, and this gives an expression which is a bit more classical Chenin Blanc expression of the region here. But then, yes, every vintage will make a bit different. And then you have the in-between ones where we have a bit of botrytis, but not much. But for example, vintage 2010, 2013, 2015, 19 are more late vintages. And 25, 24, 21, 20 are more early vintages.
If you make a caricature, you can tell you have the wines where you had a lot of heat, and I'm a big muscle man with a lot of power, and those where you do not have these strong conditions, but you have a fabulous inward feminine process, very soft. These are the two extremes, and the vintage are always between these two extremes. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'll have to get a couple bottles of each of those and taste them next to each other now. Fantastic. Well,
come here,
thank you.
Can post them.
I would love to. Maybe someday I will. But thank you again so much for your time. I've read a lot about your writings, but I've learned so much just by listening. So thank you. I've always wanted to speak with both of you, so this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your interest. What you do is great. Keep going on.
I appreciate it. That means a lot. All right. That was our interview with Virginie and Nicolas Joly. I hope everybody enjoyed. I hope everybody was able to really take in all of what he was saying. I couldn't in the first pass since it was so long and so full of information. So maybe go back and listen again. But I appreciate everybody again hanging on for the full episode and joining us on this next chapter for the Story of Wine podcast. That is our episode for this week. We will be back with another episode soon. In the meantime, cheers.